Hello everybody, welcome back to another 10-minute Marvel video. I'm Petter, and I just got done watching the first two episodes of Daredevil Born Again. Now, if you're familiar with the podcast, you'll know that I have not actually seen the Netflix show. I've watched the first three episodes, or four, I forget, where I kind of stopped on my attempt to get it watched before, well, this show came out. So, this is an interesting point for me stepping into this that I do think is going to be a point where a lot of people are joining in with this. There's going to be people who watch Daredevil Born Again who didn't watch the Netflix show because how connected was it? I think, and it's true with almost any show. Just to kind of talk about it for a second, it's true with any of the Marvel shows. When you have your movie-going audience and your show-watching audience, that overlaps some. I don't think there's a ton of people watching the shows who aren't watching the movies, at least somewhat regularly. But on the flip side, there aren't a lot of people. Well, there are a lot of people, I should say. There are a lot of people who watch the movies and don't necessarily watch the shows. So, I'm coming into this with knowledge of the shows. I watched a recap of all the Defenders, just so that I would have the knowledge kind of going into this. And I think it then, well, where I want to kind of start off with this, after kind of setting the stage for my watching of this, is I want to start off with kind of some non-spoiler thoughts on this. And I'm going to go into a little bit of my thoughts on the first two episodes of this and what I saw in the Daredevil show on Netflix, and differences or things that I liked or didn't like about how they've changed stuff, or kind of tonally what's going on in there. And I recommend you watch Daredevil Born Again before you watch that part. But I thoroughly enjoyed these first two episodes. I thought, well, one, they're long episodes. 1 hour and 50 minutes approximately. So you're getting a full movie. But it's more than that because it doesn't end. There's more episodes coming. There's 9 episodes, so 7 more to go in this series. And that's just season 1. And I think that it does a good job of taking tonally elements from the Netflix show and making it feel like that continuation. But it also does, I think, even a better job of, okay, it's a continuation, but you can jump in here. And it hits you with some emotional moments early on in a good way, and it kind of sets up this whole big world. I'm not going to say it's a flaw of the movies. I think movies are different than television shows. In a movie, you have 2.5 hours, and therefore, oftentimes, you're in New York, or you're in Wakanda in New York, and you're fairly limited as to where you go. Maybe you go somewhere else for another set piece. But here, you can really delve into kind of the world as a whole, and you see all sorts of different pieces of that here that I think, I'll just say, they do a really good job of that. And they do a good job of creating compelling characters. I'll talk about that more coming up here. But if you were thinking about diving into this series, I would recommend it. If you were worried that Marvel was going to tone it down, you're safe. There's a lot going on in here, and it's really nicely done. And there's a lot of moving pieces, and it feels like a television show that's going to be on par with stuff like WandaVision, Agatha, Loki, those where you have that intrigue of what actually is happening to them without them having to do all the character setup. Now, you have to have watched stuff like Echo to know Fisk, but even that, they reestablished the characters really quickly, and I think in a very well thought out and enjoyable way. So it's definitely after 2 episodes here, I'm excited for the next one, but it reminds me actually a little bit of Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man, where I'm excited for the next one, but I'm not necessarily on the edge of my seat being like, is it Wednesday yet? And obviously I'm watching this, or I'm doing this video on a Thursday just because I didn't have time to watch on Wednesday. I mean, hour and a half, or not hour and a half, hour and 50 minutes is a fair amount of time to invest into something. So let's move on to the spoiler talk here. Spoilers, spoilers, spoilers. You have been warned, spoilers. And I want to start out with what I think this does better than the Netflix Daredevil show. And honestly, a lot of it is very similar, or I think it does better. So what's better about it, at least in my opinion? And some of this is off of the back of the Netflix Daredevil show, but they don't need to set up the story. They don't need to tell us about everything that's already happened. We don't need to get that origin story feeling to it and see Matt kind of don the outfit for the first time. And I really appreciate that about it. Honestly, I'm done in a lot of ways with origin stories. They can be done well. I think there are times for them. Wiccan in Agatha All Along actually is an origin story, but it's more than a story just about that. And starting watching Daredevil on Netflix, it felt like or the Netflix show, it felt like an origin story. And it felt like after 4 episodes, I really wasn't bought in on any particular villain or threat or anything like that. It was just kind of meandering, maybe eventually towards something. Obviously, I know that it is a beloved show. It meanders successfully towards something. But it felt like a chance for them to do a lot of set pieces, cool fights, kind of introductory. This is who Matt Murdock, Daredevil, is, sort of thing. And I get that there's supposed to be the mystery around Karen and who everybody is in her history and the company that she worked for, but it was kind of this nameless villain. And well, we still don't have like a very substantial villain at this point. But I mean, Fisk is there. This show feels like it already has more direction and momentum towards something than the first 4 episodes did. In fact, I would say that I guess the first episode spends a chunk of time around kind of setting the stage, and for Daredevil to take off the costume to just be Matt Murdock. But I think it does it in a way that works a whole lot better for me. It is a well-timed out show, and the violence in the show feels more directed. Not, I don't mean directed it in like, oh, okay, here's the choreography that we're going to do. That they have beautiful choreography in the Netflix show. But here, to me, it feels like there's more direction and purpose to it. And Bullseye, we still have to figure out who sent him, where this all has stemmed from. And I suspect it's probably Vanessa. But there's that whole piece of that story. And I said Vanessa's name, and I immediately distracted myself to Wilson Fisk as mayor, because that's been done really well. And I like this B.B. Ulrich character. This kind of news on the streets, obviously journalistic background. Her father, Ben Ulrich, huge comic book character in terms of consistently a lens to see superhero stuff through. And I like how they're taking this, much like they did in Spider-Man Far From Home with the Daily Bugle, and making it something that's a little bit more modern, because unfortunately, for better or worse, newspapers are dying. Don't try and create something that's outside of reality by being like, oh yes, everybody reads the newspaper. Create these moments of, we have kind of this YouTube news channel, and we have this tabloid type reports that are done by J. Jonah Jameson. It all fits kind of in that modern setting in a right way to modernize stuff, at least in my opinion. So I appreciate that. I kind of appreciate that looking at that angle of, we got to clean up. We can't just have vigilantes doing the work of police, and that the headbutting with the police that we see Fisk having, they kind of know who Fisk is. They know that, I mean, there were people in the police department who were on Fisk's payroll. But to see this Fisk, it reminds me, again, I'm going to actually toss it back to Your Friendly Neighborhood Spider-Man. It reminds me some of Norman Osborn in there. Because with Fisk here, you know that he's not a good person. He has his agenda for doing this. And it's more than, I mean, it's definitely not altruistic. So, what is that agenda? And we're just waiting for the other foot to drop, or the other shoe to drop. And I love how we get the hints of that with the police commissioner, where it's just like, yeah, I know your secret. And because I know your secret, I can blackmail you. I can get you to stay around and make it look like we make nice. Whether or not we do, that's the perception, and that I get what I want. I get my success in office kind of in that first 100 days, and I have leverage on you. So what are you going to do about it? And I think that is a great use of throwing Wilson Fisk's weight around without it being kind of that comic booky. Literal weight in the comic books. Here we have a Wilson Fisk who's manipulating the system, but at the same time, he can't solve everything. We get that mention of Echo, really, in there, and how Vanessa had to take over. I think there were some thoughts that might have been because of the snap or something like that. But I like just kind of the tension of that relationships that they've actually done a good job with, from what I've seen of Fisk, of just that humanizing him, of just the presence that he is when he enters into a room, but how that's not all there is to him. It's just, yeah, like I said, I think it's a really well done element to this. And I mean, I think the last thing I want to talk about here is Foggy dying, Karen leaving. I think that's necessary. I mean, that's some of the element of Born Again. He is not only born again in terms of a new show for Daredevil, but also born again in terms of those who supported him and kind of that strength, that group around him were holding him up, but also holding him in place. Not necessarily in a bad way, but when they left, when things got tough and he didn't know how to deal with it, obviously Foggy dying, then it becomes a question of what's his purpose? What direction does he want to take it? And does he blame himself? And it seems like he does. He blames himself for Foggy's death, that Bullseye wouldn't have been able to get to him, wouldn't have known about him, except for the devil, except for Daredevil. And so to see him take that step back, and I know there were originally kind of first handful of episodes, he wasn't even donning the uniform. But I think we did a good job in balancing with that, of getting that uniform, getting that time jump, and really getting a chance to now explore Matt Murdock in an interesting way. So, where does the series go from here? Obviously, we're going to have right now the thing with the police, the witness, the white tiger, and understanding how that all comes together, but also understanding if that's going to put Daredevil back on the wrong side of things. And I mean, we know we have Muse coming up again, and by Daredevil back on the wrong side of things, I don't mean like being a bad guy. I mean, does it really put him up against Fisk again? Because now Fisk is very much vigilante. So how does this all come together? And I'm really just excited to know what Fisk's plan is over this season and next, because I don't think we fully get that paid off. I think that it's going to, this season, maybe it's going to have more of that story with Heather and Muse, and kind of Muse's obsession and probably going after Heather, and now Daredevil is having to step in and try and deal with that. At least that's how I'm putting together this story, or framing this story in my head at this point. We'll see if I'm right with that, but let me know your thoughts on the first 2 episodes of Daredevil. You can let me know them down in the comment section below. Hope that you're enjoying this content. If you are, please consider subscribing. Click that notification bell to know when new videos come out. And we'll be talking about this over on the 10 Minute Marvel podcast, which you can find here on the channel. Click on the channel, then click on the podcast tab. Or you can search for 10 Minute Marvel wherever you get your friendly neighborhood podcasts from. But with that, we'll see you next time.